Okay, continuing on the theme of writing your introduction or drafting your introduction, and a couple of problems that can come up in that process, problems that you can avoid. We're going to look at, uh, take up again this theme of signals that authors send to the reader, and talk about something that in my experience, has been uh, a problem that I've seen in a lot of manuscripts, and it's related to something I've talked about before. At least this is one of the main causes, I think, is that authors will try to squeeze the entirety of their thesis or dissertation into an article. And they've got all this information that they've worked on over 2 to 4 or more years in their heads. And sometimes they think it's all very important, or they just want to do a Control C, Control V, copy and paste into an article, and that just doesn't work. The best thing is to look at what's the main point, what's the most important way that you can drive to the main thrust of your article or your chapter or whatever you're writing. In the same way that a movie editor will cut out scenes that don't contribute to the plot as much as they should, or maybe even distract. You might find yourself in that position too, and if you don't, I'll show you what can happen. So to talk about this first, I'm going to need to do something here. Right. Okay. So carrying on. Here is a the beginning of an introduction uh, that is in the discipline of biology and bioinformatics. And as I read this, I just kind of think about that notion I just talked about. Is there too much information? Is it clear are there clear signals about where the author is going? So let's begin. In biology, we have a lot of data to analyze, and bioinformatics has emerged to aid in the analysis of large amounts of data. Some of the forms used today are graphical representations of biological networks, so it is possible to make a more efficient analysis of certain data. Many tools have already been produced in order to provide better visualization and understanding of the data. Many who enter bioinformatics have only one side of training, biology or computer science. This leads to a larger learning curve most of the time, and although there are several software packages to aid in research and analysis, people do not always know which is better or which is going to fit your research better, and sometimes do not even know if using the software will help something in your research. A comparison between the existing software will be done, demonstrating the ups and downs of each software and best application for each one, verifying the attributes such as speed, complexity, accuracy, ergonomics, among others. The interfaces will also be analyzed, how the interaction between the software and the user, and what are the purposes of each software. Mainly, the plotted networks and the results given by each software will be analyzed, showing what each shows or does not show and its best application. So I've just read through that with you. And as you may have also felt, in my experience of reading this, I had to go through it a few times to try to get a grasp of what the main point the authors were trying to make was. And you might want to pause the video at this stage, actually, just to get a feel for what I'm talking about. So keep in mind that this is a first draft of an article that was written, and it was improved, and we're going to look at how that process happened. So you do have what appears to be a kind of territory in this green part here. And then you have, after that first highlighted part, um, what might seem like a kind of move to, because you have this people do not always know which is better, So maybe this is some kind of gap. And then um, you have the authors talking about what they're going to do, which is comparing some software, analyzing the interfaces, and so on. However, it's not exactly clear what the claiming of the centrality is, or even uh, what the territory is or the gap. It's a bit confusing at the moment. And one of the reasons is this sentence right here, this one in red. Some of the forms used today are graphical representations of biological networks, so it is possible to make a more efficient analysis of certain data. So the first sentence, which you could say is a kind of claiming of centrality, the stating of importance. In biology, we have a lot of data to analyze, and bioinformatics has emerged to aid in the analysis of large amounts of data. So here we have the first kind of major clue is, okay, they're going to talk about bioinformatics and large amounts of data. And then you have this part here in red, which is some of the forms used today are graphical representations of biological networks. So it is possible to make a more efficient analysis of certain data. So you say, okay, they're going to talk about something within graphical representations, something to do with how, something related to this concept here. But then they go on to talk about problems with training, lack of training, and it's so this first part here can be a bit confusing. It's the signal to the pilot of the aircraft in one direction, when perhaps the author really wants to send him in a different direction. And so this leads me to this, perhaps you may have been wondering why I'm wearing this hat. And I don't blame you, because it could be very distracting. Like, why on earth has the instructor put on a Pikachu hat? This is my son's Pikachu hat. And it's to illustrate how distracting this can be. So if I put on this hat, probably a lot of questions popped into your head when I did that. A bit surprising, perhaps. Then you were probably wondering, I'm sure there's a purpose to this. He's taking a few seconds out of the video to put this hat on. There must be a reason for it. And indeed there has been. But until I got to the explanation of why I'm wearing this hat, it may have been distracting. So you're listening to what I'm talking about, and then maybe at the same time keeping this Pikachu hat in mind, why it might be there. And what I find is that many authors will put on this Pikachu hat in their text, this proverbial Pikachu hat, and never pick it up again and never explain why it's there. So the point of this Pikachu hat is to make the following point, which is be careful in your texts with extraneous information, and especially in your introduction, because the introduction is that metaphorical landing strip where the pilot is arriving and is looking for the signals of where she or he needs to go to park at the gate or whatever. And just like a Pikachu hat that I put on, extraneous information can distract and lead the attention of the reader down a garden path that will just muddle your point in the text. It's kind of like this picture here with Big Bird in the middle of a Star Wars scene. Doesn't seem to belong, and it makes you wonder why Big Bird is there. He may be there for a reason, who knows, but he kind of sticks out as an information that doesn't seem to belong. You have to be careful with that, especially in your introduction. That's where you're getting your reader started. And so this first part of the text, where there's a signal of a graphical representation, I found it to be a bit confusing and potentially misleading. It actually is something that does come up again in the text, but it's not clear how it fits in the introduction. But if you look down through the text, it seems that the real point, the main point that the authors want to make is that there's a lot of software out there. These software packages uh, can be confusing to somebody who doesn't have training in software use, and people who are working in the field of bioinformatics need to have a way or some kind of framework of judging which one um, works well. And it seems to me that this analysis has that main purpose. And here you have a couple of clues about that, including this here. Analysis of the interfaces, oops, and how the interaction between software and user is. And so this seems to be a main point that they want to make, but this is not really being made very well, especially when you have this other information at the top that kind of confuses. So what if you just took that out? Just like an editor in a movie editing out a scene, would this work? So if you read through that, in biology we have a lot of data to analyze. The bioinformatics and starting at the top here. In biology, we have a lot of data to analyze, and bioinformatics has emerged to aid in the analysis of large amounts of data. Many tools have already been produced in order to provide better visualization and understanding of the data. In fact, those two could even go together. So now it makes a little bit more sense that they're just talking about that there's a lot of tools that are out there to help analyze and visualize data, and that's it. That's the whole idea, is that these software packages exist, and they help by helping to visualize data better. Okay, and without talking about graphical representations as a kind of signal that might send somebody down the wrong path of what the author's point is. And as I mentioned, in the kind of gap that they seem to be making in a kind of move to, uh, there's this point about not knowing which one is better, and therefore you need an analysis. And another point here right above it, however, I would also say could be a kind of Pikachu hat, could also be a kind of uh, misleading signal to a reader, which is this here. Many who enter bioinformatics have only one side of training, um, biology or computer science, and this leads to larger learning curve. Okay, so there's a signal about training, and it might seem that their gap is going to be about training people in biological sciences or bioinformatics in the use of or merging computer science and biological science training. Arguably, that could be another confusing element. So I would say that that's something that could be looked at more carefully. And if you take that out completely and you start from the top again, in biology we have a lot of data to analyze, and bioinformatics has emerged to aid in the analysis of large amounts of data. Although there are several software packages to aid in research and analysis, people do not always know which is better or which is going to fit the research better, and sometimes do not even know if using the software will help something in the research. That sounds a bit better. But then maybe the authors, and I think they do, want to include something about training, even though this version that I'm showing you right now reads a lot better and seems to get to the point better. Um, there is that point about training. And so maybe we could think about just changing the organization of the information here to make sure that it makes more logical sense in terms of where you are guiding the reader to, the sequence in which you're delivering the signals that will eventually lead to your point in the introduction. So what if we move that to after that red part here? Move this sentence here. Many who enter bioinformatics have only one side of training. Move that to after the point about several that there are several software packages and people don't know which is better. And not, then I think the sequence would work better because you start with a claiming of centrality. We have a lot of data to analyze, and so we have these software packages, and then move straight to here. Although we have all these software packages, people don't know which one works better, and then make the point about training. That would seem to narrow it down to a gap more logically. And so you come up with this. And then eventually talk about comparison. Yes, there are a couple of mistakes that I would fix here, as you can see, and then you can polish that. But the point is that the larger organizational um, issues have been dealt with here. I've taken out extraneous information. I've reorganized the information to make the signals flow better and more logically. And it's this part that I want to focus on, especially at this point in the course. These issues here with little polishing of surface errors and other, that can come with redrafting. You don't want to worry about that too much at this stage because you're going to be changing so much probably when you draft and redraft that those little mistakes or little lexical issues will eventually become moot anyway. You're going to eliminate them, or they won't be part of the text, the final version, and so on, perhaps. So what I want to focus on here is, at this stage of the course, is how you can reorganize and signal your introductions through the ideas that you present, the sequence in which they are presented, and also some key linguistic cues to make sure that the signals that you're giving the reader are very clear. Okay. So here are some examples of how one could add um, later on some elements of cohesion to make the text flow even better. So uh, after all, after this idea of that there are many software packages, and then as a logical extension of that, signaled by this phrase, this discourse marker, after all, many who enter bioinformatics only have one side of training, and then this clear signal of a point why that all matters, therefore we need this comparison. And then it reads much better, it's much clearer in my view this way. And these sort of discourse markers we're going to look at some more in this course, and how powerful it makes no point. There is no point in presenting these discourse markers really out decontextualized without the context. These discourse markers, like after all and therefore, only make sense in this kind of context where you're saying, okay, how can we present the information in even a more logical way to even signal, to give these signals that even augment even further that we're making this logical point. But as I've just shown you now, the major issues were dealt with first. Taking out extraneous information, reorganizing the text, and perhaps this is an approach that you can take with your own introduction. First, though, I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise with a very basic story to kind of make this point, because a lot of people haven't thought about this before, about extraneous information and the presentation of organization. So we're going to take it to a very basic level first so that you can then look at your own text with a greater level of sophistication. Finally, to finish this video, you're going to be giving each other feedback on this course on your introductions as a first step. And this part is really important for you to just kind of get some ideas down on paper and have a kind of a low stakes opportunity. In other words, not really graded, not contributing to your final grade in this course in terms of the actual assessment you give to a fellow student, because you should have many steps leading to a kind of formal submission of an assignment. You should have some feedback. But sometimes students question, why does it matter? Why should I uh, give someone feedback when all I want is feedback from the professor? And you will have feedback from me and others as well. Um, but what research shows is that giving peer feedback, really the person who benefits most is not only the person receiving the feedback, but actually the giver of the feedback. Because if you can identify issues in someone else's text, then you can identify issues in your own text. So the a good academic writer is a critical writer, not only uh, writing critically, but also thinking about her or his own writing in a critical way. In order to become a critical writer, it's important to also become, arguably even first become, a critical reader of academic discourse. And so if you can look at someone else's text critically, that can help you with your own text, looking at it critically as well. And you'll need to be able to develop this. And the more you do, the more likely you'll be able to write a text that meets the expectations of journals, for example, and the people who review for those journals. So take stock of everything that we've talked about in these videos. Don't worry, this is a low stakes part of the course, but it's important for you to dig in and get your hands dirty. Keep calm, carry on, drink whatever beverages help you keep you going, and we'll look forward to reading what you have to write.